Welcome back, sailors. This is your captain speaking, and welcome to another episode of Bruise News. We're on number 17 now for Bruise News episodes. It's pretty cool. I'm enjoying the name. I'm enjoying doing this. Sorry that I took a couple days for a break. I got, some stuff. There were some changes that were made, and I'm looking into doing some other things in terms of video content and some other ideas I have going around with, not to do with these videos per se, but to do with the other video that I pump out, that it's not just going to be directed at video games, but it's going to be more talking about lots of different stuff. And we started off really well, getting, some views. We got some subscribers now, like we're up to like close to 30, but we're at 27, but I want to get that up, and I think I have some ideas on how to do that. But again, it takes a lot of you and the support from you to get these videos out there. So, I need you guys to all like them, to subscribe, get people to subscribe and share it around. So I am working on doing a Facebook page for the group, for both anyways, with just the captain in general, so I can do some things. I'm thinking about doing some streaming, doing some different ideas with lots of stuff. So we got some stuff in the work. I've been looking at like how to do things with the videos in terms of editing and stuff like that. So we have some stuff in the works, which is why we took that few days off to look at some stuff. Plus I got some changes that I made. But now that I've jibber jabbered at the start of my video as per usual, and we're gonna hop into it. So over the weekend, after we just had the RDA event, there was the Sage Northcutt event, and I think I talked about it a little bit, but Sage just ended up getting a surgery. He had 8 fractures in his face. 8 fractures, including a broken orbital. Like essentially everywhere from this side of his face, like Phantom of the Opera, was broken. Was completely broken in his face. The guy that he fought, his name is Cosmo Alexander. He's like a 37-year-old guy from 1FC. I mean, he's a beast. He was like a world champion in Muay Thai. So the dude has hands and he's got power. And Sage honestly looked a little bit nervous going into the fight, and he stood right in front of him against the ropes with his hands down. Now, I know typically that's how karate-style fighters hold their hands, but I mean, you have to be able to see things coming. Like, you have to be observant, and you can't be sitting in the pocket the way that Sage was. But he's young, and if he needs to come back and learn from this. But that's a tough loss, not because he actually lost, because people get knocked out or people lose. That happens. You can come back from that. But when you have a severe injury the way that he did, his face is probably going to bug him from now on, because that was a severe break and a severe fracture. And even though he had surgery, sometimes when it comes to those things, like when you break like an arm or a leg or the back of your head or something that is used to, well, not used to, but something that is sort of intended to protect you, that oftentimes the bones will recover, and they'll go over the breaks. Like, they'll grow back over the breaks to protect those spots, to make them tougher. But when it's somewhere like in your face where that's not really meant to be broken, like your fingers, your face, they tend to come back weaker than they were before. So I'm just hoping that it doesn't have that same effect on Sage, and he can come back and have a good full recovery and all that stuff. So on top of that, we do have some cool news. The UFC actually just signed a deal with Aurora Cannabis. I think they're called Aurora Cannabis. Yes, Aurora Cannabis. They're a research company that has to do with CBD treatments and stuff like that. The UFC just signed a multi-million-dollar contract with them to do research on fighters for CBD treatment, for recovery treatment, and all that stuff, because that's a huge thing that's coming out now, and they know that for a long time that CBD is one of the best ways for fighters to recover. So it might end up being beneficial for everybody. The UFC already has USADA and all that stuff protecting them, so they have paid doctors to look at, like, the UFC have access to some of the best doctors in the world for their fighters, and which is why they're always back from recovery so fast. And it's so they work on them a lot, because it's very important to the UFC to have fighters like that, because there's other big sports in the world like football and hockey that don't. Actually, hockey's not so bad. I think hockey actually does have good doctors and good medical staff working with them. But football and basketball, they're known to not be the greatest. Like, there's movies out about football and allowing players to play concussed, and there's jokes about that all over the place. So it's really serious when it comes to those. My mustache is... I must ask you a question. Um, so yeah, it's uh, it's good that they have this, and now that they're adding this CBD treatment, it might end up being beneficial for a lot more fighters to be able to deal with the recovery process. Sometimes they have, some issues after the fight that don't necessarily, come back to a 100% medical degree. Like sometimes people have it's hard for their muscles to recover. So they're looking into that, and they've signed a huge contract. So that's one thing. Dana White and Oscar De La Hoya are beefing. They're beefing hard. They're like Dana's talking about wanting to fight Oscar in a UFC octagon, and if he wants to talk about stuff. My mustache is bugging me. What is going on with you? Come on. I'm keeping it in. This is staying in the video. Mustache on fleek. Oh, it looks weird again all of a sudden. Do a rock pose. Anyways, Dana and Oscar are really beefing about this stuff because Oscar was talking shit about Dana and saying that that Dana was afraid to make the Tito versus Liddell fight, and that he fixes fights and stuff like that. Dana's never seemed like a guy who's fixed any fights. He doesn't even throw his good fighters against cans. Like, he really throws them through the dungeon when he starts bringing people out. Like, he puts them right where they deserve, and that's what they have to fight. And we end up seeing that a lot. Now, I do agree some people get easier fights than they necessarily need to get to where they need to in terms of the ranking system. But sometimes that has to do with the fact that some divisions are a little bit weaker than others. Like Conor McGregor, for example. Conor McGregor rose through the ranks and went right to Aldo after like 5 fights or something like that, 6 fights within 2 years. But I mean, if you look at the featherweights that are in that division, there weren't many, and then all of the other ones were injured, like Chan Sung Jung and Mendez, who Conor ended up fighting anyways. But Mendez, was really one of the only names that Conor fought before he fought Aldo for the title. And Mendez is good, but Mendez hasn't done anything since. And then he got hit for steroids shortly after the Conor fight, so it's just interesting that way. So, lastly, we have UFC on TSN 4, and I have some predictions for you, starting with the main card. So that's the third fight. Well, the whole thing's the main card. Like, once it gets to the pay-per-view, it's the main card. So we're starting from the third fight because there's 3 light heavyweight fights at the end. So I thought I would just do the third fight, the co-main, and then the main event, because those are the fights that everybody's really looking forward to. The first fight is Jimmy Manuwa versus Alexander Rakic. And it's an interesting one because I don't understand how Jimmy Manuwa is even still in the UFC competing. I think it's because he's exciting and he puts on exciting fights. Like, he's like kind of like that Chris Lieben, where he goes in there and he throws firepower and it makes for an exciting match whether or not he gets knocked out or not. So he's in his last 3 fights, he's been knocked out twice, and he lost his other fight by decision. His last fight he lost against Santos, who's actually fighting for the title. So that's interesting. That fight is in a couple months or the end of the month. I forget exactly when, but it's happening. And that's an interesting fight too, but we'll talk about that in another video. Anyways, Manuwa doesn't seem like he really has a chin. He's, kind of getting at the end there, and he did really well in Elite FC, which is that European fight league, or the, in England and stuff like that. Like, he did really good over there, but coming over to the UFC, it's a different animal. It's a different thing entirely, and he hasn't had the best success over here that he has over there. I do think that Rakic is going to beat Manuwa. I think that Rakic is far too tall. He's 6'6", so he's a tall guy, and he really knows how to use his body well. Like, he's a good wrestler. He has just as many finishes with his hands as he does submissions. So the guy really knows how to use his body, and that's important. But there are problems with being tall because you tend to have to jab down, and when you're jabbing down, you don't have as much. You don't have as much on the jab as you would if you were throwing up, because you can pop your shoulder up, but when you're down, when you throw the jab down, you actually leave your chin exposed entirely. So I don't think that Manuwa was small enough that he's going to be punching directly down. Like, it's not like that. But again, the further that you have to punch down to jab somebody, or that length, the more unprotected your jaw is. And Manuwa does throw fire, so that is something that Rakic has to look at. But I do think that Rakic is too good. I think that, well, not that he's too good. I just think that he uses his body well, and I think that Manuwa isn't good enough to beat him. But I've been really wrong lately, so I'm really hoping that the younger Rakic can get the job done. I do think that he's going to score the KO in the first round. The next fight is Ilir Latifi versus Volkan Ozdemir. Now, this is another good fight because both these dudes, Ozdemir fought against DC and he lost pretty bad. But before that, he was knocking. He had like 3 knockouts in a row with all within 40 seconds. As soon as he got into the UFC and got onto that top 10 spot, he started knocking everybody out and very fast. So people thought he had hands, and I do think that he still has hands, but I don't think that he's a complete fighter. Ilir Latifi trains with DC, and he was begging for the fight after he just scored a knockout about 6 or 7 months ago. So Ilir is good. And he has all the pieces to be a champion, but he's really, really small. Like, he's so small. He should be trying to drop off all the muscle. If you look at him, he's like a short ball of muscle. Like, he's kind of crazy. He's bad. His English is bad. He's kind of funny sometimes, but I mean, I don't think it's that serious. And DC didn't seem to think that Ilir was a threat at all. Probably because DC is one of the best in the world, and he probably tosses him around in training camp, so he knows what to expect. But when you have to look at the both of them, I think that Ilir is more of a complete fighter, and I think that Ozdemir, sort of, not that he got lucky getting to the title, but I think that sometimes you get a little lucky. And I think that he was exciting, and he did what he had to do, and it resulted in him getting to a title. And I don't think that he's complete. So I do have Ilir winning the fight by decision, 3rd round decision, UD. That's how I have it. But again, I could be wrong. The last fight is going to be a good one. The last fight is Alexander Gustafsson versus Anthony Smith. Oh man, I completely blanked. I said it was a good one. I was so excited because I was thinking about a bunch of names. So this is a really, 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 really interesting fight because Anthony just fought for the title against John Jones, and John Jones completely stifled his game entirely. Smith had nothing for Jones at all. Now, do I think that it was Jones being so good that he just completely dismantled this guy? No, I don't think it was that. I think that John Jones is one of the best and will go down as one of the best UFC fighters. He's a piece of shit, and he does a lot of piece of shit stuff, but I think that John is sort of moving into the more humbled version of John, sort of. I actually just read something today about him being super cocky and kind of a piece of garbage. But I mean, sometimes that's just part of your personality, and especially when you're an athlete that comes from a family of athletes, and you're successful, and he's had his mess ups, but he really needs to be more humble from them and not so cocky, because realistically, like, if you put John Jones under a microscope, you could throttle him for days with roasting. You could roast him for days. He better not ever go on a show that allows someone to roast him, because he's got a lot of ammunition against him. Anyways, this isn't about John Jones. This is about Alex Smith and Alexander Gustafsson. Anthony Smith is really good. He's a good fighter. He's got really strong hands. He's knocked out a lot of legends, and he didn't get beat in the Jones fight. Like, he wasn't completely beaten down and finished. So I mean, that says a lot, but he's also young, and he was a hungry fighter. Alexander Gustafsson, on the other hand, is phenomenal. He has really good hands. Now, he lacks in the wrestling department, but he's not terrible on the ground, like off his back, or even he was the first person to ever take John Jones down. Now, in my opinion, I think it was a little bit of a slip against Jones, but again, he's the first guy to ever take him down. DC didn't even take him down in the first fight at all when they fought, so I think that says a lot about Gustafsson. But again, he's a tall guy. His reach is shorter than John's, but he's still a great fighter, and his boxing is it's so good. He's such a good boxer, and I think that when you have to look at it between the two, I think that precision punching will always beat power punching. 10 out of 10 times. If you were simulating the fight, I would say that 9 out of 10 times that precision punching will beat power punching, because power punching isn't a reliable source to get the job done, whereas precision punching is. Precision punching can be used in many different ways. It can be used as a counter punching. It can be used to stifle, an attack. It's the better, more efficient way of working when you're a fighter, and that's extremely important. Alexander Gustafsson is still a young guy. He's only 31 years old or 32. He's still young. He's still really good. He's number 2 in the world in the light heavyweights, but he just won't get another shot at John Jones. So he has to kind of figure out where he wants to sit in that, or just pray that John loses the title and he can scoop it up in order to get another shot at Jones. But he's lost to him twice, and I don't think that Anthony Smith has anything for Gustafsson that Gustafsson won't be able to handle. Unless he connects with some heavy power shots, then he can knock out Gustafsson. But I don't see that happening. The only person I ever saw beating Gustafsson was Anthony Johnson, and Anthony Johnson isn't a fighter anymore, and he did do that. He did beat Gus like that, and it was kind of a lucky shot the way that it happened. So it's just one of those things. Not saying that luck can't happen, but chances are that Gustafsson will go to town on Anthony Smith and really work the body, work the head, and it will be a bad night for him. I have Gustafsson actually winning the fight by TKO in the third round. Early third round, I think that he's going to get the job done. I think that the work to the body and going to the head late in the second round and early third round is going to spell disaster for him, because it will be a hand-heavy attack, and Anthony Smith will be trying to take Gustafsson's head off. So all the shots that Gus is landing will be far more effective than the stuff that John was using. And I'm so sorry. I was trying to avoid that so bad. I did 3 videos before this trying to get this done, just waiting for those to go off and being like, come on now. And they still went off, even though I turned it down. But what can you do? Anyways, I want to thank everybody for watching the video. It was a little bit longer of one today, but I figured that I could talk about more stuff because I took a couple days off. I got things in the works. I'm doing that, and I appreciate the support from everybody who's supporting me right now. But let's get more of the word out that I'm awesome and that I'm doing this, and we need to get these out better and have more fun with them. Anyways, I appreciate all of you. Like, share, and subscribe, and make sure that you have a great day.